So today we're talking to Andrew McDowell, who's one of our partners at TPC Leadership. And we're going to be talking about coaching, but some of the kind of deeper, most important elements of coaching. So Andrew, welcome. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Okay. I'm very proud to have been a partner with TPC for the last nearly 20 years now. But my prior background to that is as a clinical and health psychologist. That's what my training, my background. I was an academic for a number of years. And I think probably from a coaching point of view, one of the things that was most important for me is in my early 20s. I was very fortunate to meet and then work with John Whitmore and Diana Whitmore, who kind of adopted me, from being a psychologist who thought he was right about lots of things, into thinking a little bit more from a coaching oriented framework and starting to integrate that into the different way I worked with people.
Yeah, I see. Interesting. And so you've been running coaching as a kind of at various levels for a number of years now. But what's the thing in that time that you've really learned a lot around in terms of the intervention and something that somebody new to the field may not realize that coach can really drive?
I think people get quite evangelical about coaching. If they've never done anything else, and it's the only thing they've ever learned, they get a sense of touching into something more possible for themselves. So,
Mm-hmm.
from a bit more of a psychological level, coaching is really about helping people access the sense of self-efficacy and, help people really connect with their sense of being able to achieve things in the world and to explore what we call in coaching more of their potential. And that's one of those words which is a little bit overdone and sounds very kind of twee at times. But really what we're talking about is the very foundational humanistic roots of coaching. It was people are capable of much more than they think they are. And sometimes that thought partner, someone to help them access their thinking, is a tremendous gift to offer people. So I think nowadays people are kind of in touch with coaching as a technique, but actually
Mm-hmm.
it's a transformational process of helping people become more, and deliver more on what's meaningfully important for them in their lives and the sort of contribution they can make in whatever role that they're doing.
Yeah, sure. And their impacts on themselves as well as the impact on others, I guess.
Yeah. A lot of the coaching work that I do with people, for example, is very much in the sort of meaning and purpose space. So, how, particularly with senior people who've been kind of just getting, they're able to achieve things in their lives, they're already self-efficacious, they're already, self-reliant. How can they really actualize that? So how can they do the work that they really think they want to do? How can they make the contribution they really want to make? And, how can they enjoy this time that they have on this planet, in a way which is good for themselves, but also good for other people and communities and organizations they serve. So, I think
Mm-hmm.
it's like one of the great things about coaching is that it helps people connect with that and unleash it.
Yeah, completely. Completely. And one thing you and I have discussed before is about that sort of expert level of coaching, that actually the questioning, how you question someone and how you get the best out of another person through coaching. What do you think really separates sort of
Yeah.
the good art of expert questioning versus the sort of less developed art of it?
It's a great question. So well done.
Thank you.
Really good questions get you thinking. And
Hmm.
I think this is one of the most unappreciated skills in coaching. So, the coaches fundamentally do two things. They listen well and they ask good questions, and then they help structure conversations to help people develop their thinking and come up with new ideas for things really. So, my experience is that, um, it's very well, particularly when people are learning to do coaching, or if they've not been trained with more of a psychological bent to it. It's very easy to be transactional about your questions. It's very easy just to ask what's going on, or, just to get people to tell you stuff they already know.
Mm-hmm.
Really excellent coaching is about helping people think new things that they hadn't thought before, that they were challenged and supported in the coaching dynamic and relationship to come up with new ideas, new thinking, contact other parts of themselves that hadn't really expressed itself. So, in really good coaching, you're trying to get people to disclose new things to themselves and to you in order to raise their awareness. So the two big, like for anyone learning to coach, if you're good at helping people raise their awareness, help people think more and differently about stuff, then they're able to be more resourceful because they've got new data to come up with new options or new ideas with. It's pretty hard to come up with new ideas. Coaching, part of the coaching framework and philosophy is helping people to sort of generate their own way forward rather than just being told what to do. It's quite hard to do that if you haven't been supported to think differently. So, the best coaches ask questions which are very good at supporting people to come up with new thinking. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. So it's kind of, it's not just applying a technique, like the technique of coaching, but it's actually really understanding how to get to the depths of the individual's sort of psychology almost.
Yeah, I think you have to learn how to apply the techniques. That takes some learning and development, but and when you're training coaches, you offer frameworks for helping people to do that. But if you understand what you're trying to achieve at a deeper level, then it gives you more kind of ability to apply those techniques successfully and apply those techniques in ways which generate real change for people. So people don't show up for coaching because they already know their own answers. We all think as coaches that our job is to help people recognize what's right for them and, come up with their own solutions. Yes. Most of the time that's true. But really good coaches help them access the new thinking, access the new awareness, think differently so they can become more aware of what's going on for them and in the situations they're operating in, and therefore come up with new solutions.
Sure. So let's shift slightly into coaching models. There's lots of different models out there that people will see around how coaching operates. At TPC Leadership, we use the TGROW model, and we have that at the core. But can you explain a little bit how that is, the similarities and how it kind of looks at other models alongside TGROW that we use?
Yeah, well, the first distinction to make is that GROW came from GROW. So when John first published his book, Coaching for Performance, he was the first one to publish this model, the GROW model. And later on, a man called Miles Downey, another, associate and a colleague in those early years, said, well, actually, how about we put a topic on the front, because people don't often know what their goal is when they're sitting down for the conversation. But we credit the TGROW model to John as well, because that's where it was, it's just come from. And really, the TGROW model is the superstructure for any or scaffolding really for any kind of coaching conversation, because it describes in detail what it actually is that you do in a coaching session. All the other models that have come subsequently are kind of variations or derivations from that way of thinking, because if you look at the definition of coaching, it's kind of like the kind of movement or volition of where am I now to where do I want to be, and then how do I get there? That's the kind of definition of it. It came from the term carriage originally, coach, and carriage is moving from one place to another. So the TGROW model kind of epitomizes this in many ways. It's like it starts off with what's the topic, what are you here to talk about, and what do you want specifically from this conversation? Then let's talk about where you are now in relation to what it is that you want. so we can help generate new ideas to get where you want to go. And then the W, the will, is about what are you going to do? What's the plan of action to put into case? Now, the thing is, that model wasn't theoretically derived. It came from looking at coaches who were really good at what they did, and they found that there was this pattern underpinning it. So all of the other models are obviously trying to do the same thing, otherwise it wouldn't be coaching. So usually T-GROW layers very nicely into any of the other models. So that's not to say the other models aren't useful. They really are. So there's the Oscar model, there's the Clear model, there's the Stepper model. There are all these different models, but you can easily see how T-GROW is active and functional within all of those models, because you have to start off with a goal in coaching. Yeah, that's a fundamental part of what coaching is. You have to have a destination in mind, or an output that you're looking for, a will at the end. You have to raise awareness, and you have to support people to generate new ideas. Otherwise, it's not really coaching. So, all the other models do layer into this T-GROW framework. So we've learned that it's useful to teach people and support people to learn T-GROW as a way of structuring conversations that lead to outcomes. And then they might utilize elements of the other models or different techniques, different processes, in order to really, focus in on certain things. So Clear is really, really good for contracting. It's really good to help people think about how do you get real clarity about what you want. Stepper is very good for emotional stuff. So it's just, you would learn different models for different processes, but actually they all come back to T-GROW. And it's useful to really understand that's where it's coming from. John was the first one to talk about it, but it was kind of accidental that it became so popular. It was real vision. It was visionary to sort of look at all of this stuff and say, what's the process that's going on here? And I think I haven't seen, in 30 years of coaching, I haven't seen a better model that kind of describes actually what the process is that people go through when they're having good coaching.
Yeah, completely. And you work for TPC Leadership and across our TPC Health business as well. So you're applying these kind of models and techniques to the boardroom as well as the clinic type environment.
Yeah.
What do you see any similarities or differences there across both, or is it broadly the same kind of challenge but in a different context?
Yeah, well, I think in all situations with coaching, you're trying to increase self-efficacy. You're trying to support people to connect to more resourcefulness. You're trying to help people, be more self-determining, whatever it is. Depending on what you are applying the coaching for, means you might change a little bit in how you do it. So, I work in the leadership space. When I'm coaching leaders, it's a bit different to if I'm helping people learn how to use coaching clinically. And the fundamental difference is how directive the coaching needs to be and what sort of risk you're managing. So, in a clinical situation, the coach has knowledge, skills, and kind of information they have to help the people to utilize in their navigation of the way forward. So, if you're a physiotherapist or a psychologist or a doctor or a social prescriber or a health coach, any of those kind of roles, you will have an opinion about what the person does as a result of your interaction with them. It's not quite the same as when you're doing executive coaching with someone where actually whatever they want to talk about, that's okay. Actually, you're there to do a job and you're there to think about delivering the organization's goals in the healthcare setting, in a way which actually improves someone's health. So it is a bit different. You're applying the same approaches and techniques, but with a different objective. And in the health and social care space, it's very much around making sure that you have a shared decision with someone, making sure that, there's a way of engaging the person, activating the person through the coaching process, so that whatever the coaching does helps improve their health or care in whatever way that you're there to support them with.
Yeah. Excellent.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah,
Does that make sense?
it does make sense. Sorry, I missed the does. Yes, that does make sense. Thank you, Andrew. And then just to finish on, so if we're talking about people coaching at that real expert level where they're seen as a real leader in the field, what's the key things that needs to be different at that level versus somebody who's really just starting out, or kind of reading a book and starting to get interested in coaching? What's the real difference there?
Help me understand the question. Is it how am I different as a coach if I'm coaching someone super senior versus?
No, what I mean is somebody who's a expert coach. What have they learned as part of the experience of coaching that sort of differentiates them from somebody starting out in the coaching world?
I think, yeah, that's a good question, actually. I think someone who's just starting out in coaching worlds often, will certainly be my experience personally, but a long time ago now, but also in having trained and, supported, I think in the healthcare system alone, we've trained something like 20,000 people to use coaching as part of their roles. In the UN sector, it's another couple of thousand. In various commercial sectors around the world, it's all sorts of numbers. I wouldn't be able to count them all. But I reckon there is a similar pattern that when you're new, you're very conscious about keeping to the models and staying rigidly faithful, appropriately, to following a process. And that's important. But as you learn to grow and develop and build confidence, I think what happens is you go beyond structure into what's the underlying principles and mindsets that a coach need to hold to be really present to the other person. And then as you do that, you become able to move more fluidly into what needs to emerge and what needs to happen next. So, I think when I was learning to coach many years ago, and when I see other people learning to coach now, they want to have all their right questions ready. They want to know what question I should ask in this situation, or they want to be very specific around certain techniques, and that's really appropriate. You need to develop that muscle. You need to kind of structure that. But having supervised many coaches over the years, they say two things. One is they wish they'd learned to challenge a little bit earlier, and contract around how to challenge people more specifically earlier. And two, they wish they'd learned to actually be more present to the person that they're talking to, rather than worrying about what they're going to say next. So
yes, I see.
I think you only really develop that with time. Learning to challenge, learning to actually really. That's a function of being really present to that person, because if I'm truly listening to you, which, very few people have access to really good listening. One, we don't really listen to each other very well anymore, but a coach does that. They have to do that. They have to be really good at listening. And if you listen very carefully and sensitively, and in a way where you're very present to opportunities for shift, then actually you're able to really connect to those opportunities to challenge in a way which really delivers insight for someone. I've seen so many coaches have their, when they're learning, have their structure that they're following, which means they miss the obvious to someone who's more experienced. And they ask a general question rather than a really specific question. If you're looking at it as a novice and you're looking at someone who's been doing it for a few years, you hear and see different things.
Yeah, and somebody who's got that experience, has been there before, and they kind of knows when to sort of slightly change the conversation to suit the individual, rather than, as you say, sticking rigidly to a framework.
Yeah, and that's not to say it's not right to stick rigidly. It's just have done rigid sticking to it for long enough that you don't have to. Do you know what I mean? It's like,
I see. It makes sense.
The only real way to learn coaching properly is do coaching. Think about what's underpinning what you're trying to achieve, and then do more coaching. and then
Yeah.
think about what you're learning as a coach, and then do more coaching. So, you need your 10,000 hours to be an expert. And I'm not saying for a moment that guarantees you'll be an expert, but you'll be much more likely to be in that space.
Yeah, exactly.
If you've done a lot of practice.
Yeah, completely. Well, listen, Andrew, that's really, really good of you. Great to share some of your expertise with us. And thank you so much for your time.
Thanks.